So, I guess I want to start by saying I'm from New York, and I know that New York's dramatic image as a high powered, fast paced city sometimes makes us forget that there's another New York, a New York that is worlds away from skyscrapers. In fact, much of New York is impressively, beautifully, luxuriously rural, and a place where vineyards have grown for more than a century. But I also want to point out that the modern New York wine industry is very different than that wine industry was even 30 years ago. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Let me tell you who's here with me. Christy Frank, there she is. Christy is the founder of Copake Wine Works in the Hudson Valley and Berkshires. She has worked for many wine industry publications, written for them. She's also had a solid career in many aspects of the wine industry, including working for Moet Hennessy USA. She's an advanced sommelier with the Court of Master Sommeliers, holds a WSET diploma, and is a member of Les Dames d'Escoffier. She recently launched a canned cocktail business called Hamlet Hound. Maybe cocktails later, but not right today, Christy. And Yannick Benjamin is a New York City-based sommelier and restaurateur. He's worked for an array of top restaurants for the last 25 years in New York City. In 2003, a car accident left Yannick paralyzed, but it did not stop him. He is a para-athlete. He's competed in several races, including the New York City, Chicago, and Boston marathons. And in 2012, he founded Wine on Wheels, focused on raising funds and awareness to aid employment for the disabled. He was awarded Wine Enthusiast Sommelier Beverage Director of the Year, and he's about to open a wine store, actually, which we'll hopefully hear about in a bit. So welcome, you two. I'm so glad you're here.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Let's start by talking about New York's wide range of styles of wine, because there are so many wines that we know that belong to the viniferous species, Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Chardonnay. They all grow well in New York State, but there are also Native American varieties. And then there are hybrids that are crosses of those Native American varieties plus vinifera varieties. So the range is huge. And I think, maybe 30 years ago, that was seen as something of a negative. I'm wondering if today you think that impression has changed and that people see New York as a source of, a big kaleidoscope of different kinds of wines. Christy?
I think when we talk about the hybrids, I believe, we recently have talked about vinifera as the end all be all, but vinifera is the species that we all, the Riesling, the Chardonnay, all the great varieties that we know and we love. But grapes like Catawba, which is one of the Native American varieties, Vidal, Vignoles, all of these really old grape varieties, I believe there are more of them planted in New York than vinifera grapes by a huge amount. And I think what's really exciting about them is because they are grape varieties that are really, really well adapted to this place that they're from, where they've been growing for many, many, many years. As we start to talk about climate change and how to deal with that, these grapes are very well suited for that. And New York just has so many of them that in a way, they're kind of going back in time and back to the future all at once with these grapes that make awesome styles that we're going to be hearing more about and tasting more of.
Yeah, important point. Yannick, jump in here. What would you say?
Certainly I think that New York is positioned to make some of the best wines. Obviously, there was a setback with Prohibition. But, some of the earliest plantings of vineyards were here on the East Coast. We know that already. Just take, for instance, Jamesport, in Virginia, where they were required to plant 10 vines in their backyard. Of course, that didn't that they didn't fulfill that because a lot of them were Puritans, so they didn't drink, right? But where I'm going with this is, if you really think about it, if you're a geology nerd, geologically speaking, it's such a mosaic, and it offers such high quality soil here. Plus, if you think about it too, New York has always been considered to have one of the best water resources, not just in the United States, but in the world. And then you've got this incredible fjord of like the Hudson River Valley cutting right through it, really adding this incredible microclimate. So there is this really incredible diversity of schist to sandy soils out in the North Fork. And that's what really always impresses me. And I think right now it's just kind of finding what actually works, but they're there. I mean, they're certainly there. It's just about getting the word out there.
That is such an important point, Yannick. I had never thought about this comparison to New York water, but I remember when I moved from New York City to California, the thing I missed so much was how good tap water is in New York. I mean, it sounds funny, but that pure water from the Berkshires and the Adirondacks, it's just absolutely delicious. And that kind of pure minerality, I think, does show up in some of the wines, which we'll see. Let's talk about coolness for a minute, though, because being in a cool region is cool. I mean, it's like conceptually cool. But I'm wondering what you think. What's the most important thing coolness gives to New York's wines? Yannick, you go first on this.
Well, coolness, I think if you're into wines that offer vibrancy, energy, acidity, freshness, I think that's what New York State wines are all about. Whether you're having a Riesling or a Chardonnay to a Cabernet Franc to even Saperavi, there's a certain energy and tension that you find that you don't find anywhere else in the United States, where I think there's more of a heavier emphasis on ripeness, which I like, nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking for something more like the French like to call vin de soif, or a glue wine, right? Easy quaffing. I think they really kind of offer that, particularly on the red wine side of things. But as far as the white wines, I think there's a real angular feel, high acidity, and also this potential of making some of the best sparkling wines is happening. I mean, no one's talking about that enough, but I mean, you're hearing more about the industry, but I think in a matter of a few years, we're going to see a lot more sparkling wines on shelves in the future from the state of New York.
Yeah, I really hope so, because New York started out early on with Golden Seal making sparkling wines, and it lost its footing for a while. But hey, Yannick, any guy who drops Saperavi into the conversation, which is I'm going to tease him about this because that's a very obscure Georgian variety, but it was one of the great founder varieties. And so pretty cool to drop that in. Christy, what do you think about coolness?
How can I top Saperavi?
I know. All right, let's choose something even more obscure. Go.
Gosh, well, it's not obscure, but Lemberger. I love a little Lemberger, also known as Kek Francos. Am I getting that correct? But from a technical standpoint, when we're talking about coolness, we're just talking about being able to extend the growing season. And I think as we start to look at regions and think about regions that are really well suited for the future, coolness is kind of the holy grail. So whereas New York might have struggled a little bit more with ripeness, these days the climate is in its favor, and we're just able to see this sort of balance of delicious fruit ripeness, but like Yannick was talking about, just balanced by this lovely freshness and this acidity that is something that just makes for wines that are great with food, that are great on their own, that are just the kind of wines that more and more everybody wants to drink. I certainly know I want to drink.
Yeah. Go ahead, Yannick, you're jumping in.
No.
I want to make a distinction between freshness and acidity. Because a lot of people will say, well, freshness comes from acidity, and in part that's true. But there's this old Asian idea of things that are cool and things that are warm. So the example I sometimes give is a cucumber is cool, even if it's at room temperature. There's something cooling about the whole idea of a cucumber, right? And so freshness, you often hear Bordeaux producers, for example, talk about freshness in wine. It's not that they want their wines to be high in acid, but they want them to have, I think, Yannick, you used the word energy. They want them to have this cooling energy that is really kind of seductive to have. Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, I tell you what, let's launch into these wines, because we have three very different, fascinating wines. And Christy, we're going to ask you to lead us off. This is I'm going to hold it up, the Sweet Walter Rosé, made by the late Walter Taylor, quite a flamboyant character. Tell us about him and the winery and this wine.
So these wines, so Walter Taylor was, I believe, the grandchild of the founder of Taylor Winery. And Taylor Wine Co. was one of the original wineries in New York, pre-prohibition, I believe. And Coca-Cola purchased it at one point. And when that happened, Walter sort of lost, in the whole process of these things, the way sometimes they go, he lost the rights to his name, the rights to his heritage. So he made a bit of a mistake about that. And he is just, there's stories that you can read about like putting pink tanks in the vineyard and processions throughout the towns, and just crazy wild stories. The winery that we're drinking from, like it's Bully Hill. So Bully Hill Vineyards, and he's famous for his goat wines, his goat wine red, his goat wine white. And they're some of the first wines that I ever drank, the first real wines that I ever drank when I was in college up at Cornell, doing wine tours. I remember the first time I had a bottle of goat wine white and was just like, what is this? This is delicious. This is charming. Like, I want to be a grown-up, like if I get to drink this. This wine is Sweet Walter. The Sweet Walter lineup tends to be the sweet wines, but sometimes we think, oh, sweet wines aren't serious. Sweet wines aren't, we don't want to be drinking the sweet wines, but I challenge anyone to try this and not just be totally charmed. I'm not 100% sure what the grapes are that are in it, because this wine is not about the specific grape varieties, but I'm pretty sure that there's a fair amount of Catawba that's in here, which is one of those native grape varieties that just makes for kind of a naturally pink rosé. It's got a little bit of a gray color to it, so you just get a little bit of a skin contact, and it's just beautiful and pink. Not getting too technical, but it is a grape that is naturally just very high in acid, which is when you've got some sweetness, you want that acid to just kind of like counterbalance each other. And I just find this as super charming aperitif wine. Drink it with your foie gras, drink it by the pool, just drink it. I just love this wine.
I can tell. Yannick, tell us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's really important because in the wine world within the last few years, and especially, even if you look at the trends that are happening in Germany with the Grosse Gewächs and, bone dry wines, I think we shouldn't be afraid of sugar. Sugar in wine, residual sugar makes for a really magical pairing, especially for really complex cuisines, like Indian cuisine, Moroccan tangine, Lebanese food, where there's a lot of play on these sweet and sour fruits, dates, figs, you name it, and these real floral, intense aromas. And so I think that's, a wine like this on its own, depending on who the individual would be. And I completely agree with Christy. This is an aperitif wine. It's beautiful. It's easy drinking. You can put an ice cube in it. I would even venture, if you're even creative, you can probably play and do some fun little cocktails with it, low ABV alcohol, cocktails. So that's what sugar does. Sugar really adds a layer to it, another dimension to the wine itself, and a lot of versatility. And so we need to get over that fact that, sugar's bad. Of course, everything in moderation, no doubt about it. But I love the way sugar is such an advantage when you're on the floor trying to do food pairings.
I'm trying to see if I have I don't, how much sweetness is in this wine, but it is we know, anybody in the wine business knows that people say, oh, I only like dry wines. And yet, the biggest selling beverage in the United States, other than coffee, is cola. Cola has 11% residual sugar. And this wine, I think, has about 4%, maybe 5. So, I mean, as Americans, we really, we have a real dichotomy about not walking the walk that we talk. But I'm with you. I think this is like, I don't know, you just dove into a pool full of watermelons or something. It's
Oh, I like that.
Really super fresh, very lively. And I don't know, I've started to stop. Just taking a note and writing down, strawberries or all these medium acid, light body, and instead just sort of feel the wine. Is it alive? Does it feel like a person? Does it feel like, I know this is weird, but does it feel like someone else is there talking back to you? And I think this wine is very alive. You can feel that it came from good grapes, and Catawba, it was like America's first rosé in a sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love to sell, I'm actually going to get this wine at the shop very soon, but I love to sell sort of sweet Catawbas from New York State to anybody who comes in and who is asking specifically for a white Zinfandel. I'm like, this is what you need. This is what you should be drinking because it's local. It's adapted to where it's from. It's delicious. Like, white Zinfandel is great, but you're not in California. You're in New York. So drink this instead. So it's so much fun to sell to sort of a ready-made audience. And then it's just fun to sell to anybody who wants something a little charming.
Much better than white Zinfandel. First of all, it's more alive. Second of all, it's more spicy. And third of all, it's more minerally. It's, I think, in my book, it's leagues above white Zin. All right. Well, we're going to the Ravines next. And I'm the one who said I would take this wine. I'm just going to go straight out and say, I think New York State makes absolutely the best Riesling in the United States. I don't think, neither of you would disagree, would you?
I completely agree with you. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, Riesling is not a very big grape in California. Even Washington State, which years ago used to make a lot of Riesling, doesn't make as much anymore, at least fine, high-end, artisanal, small production Riesling. Wines that are bone dry, minerally edged, very crystalline, sleek, full of, almost vibrational energy. And that's this Ravines. It was, the winery was founded by a husband and wife team in 2001. And they also make reds, but sparkling wine. They also are getting into the sparkling wine game to echo Yannick's comment, and also to echo Yannick's comment. They attribute the quality of this Riesling in part to these shale and schist soils, which Upper New York State shares with the Mosel region of Germany. I mean, that's a very interesting fact. Yeah. Yannick, give me your thoughts on this one.
I've had the good fortune to visit them, and I've always loved their wines. They're on the west side of Seneca Lake, and I think that's really important because Seneca Lake sort of dictates the quality of wine that you can grow, or it allows you to grow grapes there. It moderates the actual climate. And I think, I can't remember the last time Seneca Lake actually froze. It's so deep. It just kind of gives you insight, even though we're in an area that's really cold, it's tucked away just below Rochester. We're heading towards the Canadian border. But this moderating effect that Seneca Lake has is quite impactful. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if you plant 1 mile away from Seneca Lake, I mean, you're doomed for frozen grapes, and whereas you have to, the closer you are, obviously, the better you're increasing your chances, without a doubt. And I think that, talking about Lisa and Morton, really interesting couple too. Morton, he grew up part of his life in France, if I'm not mistaken, but he's actually Danish. And he actually worked in wineries in West Texas and then also North Carolina, which I think is really important experience to bring to a place like New York, to have that kind of domestic experience, to understand what it's like to grow and make wine in a really hot place, but then also in a really humid place. Because let's not forget, the state of New York can get quite humid, and you have to have the ability to be able to be a great farmer to deal with that. But
Well said.
but the Riesling that they make, I think, is just incredible. Right on the northwest corner of Seneca. I just have all the respect for what they're doing, and I love their reds as well. They make some really spectacular reds that are actually pretty age-worthy. I've had some older stuff too as well, so check them out.
Yeah, Catherine is writing in saying that she adores the RAVINES wines. And just to echo your comment, she says the red wines should not be overlooked. They're superb, especially the Cabernet Franc, and that the lake is 683 feet deep. However, Cheryl points out it did actually freeze in 1914. Cheryl, hope you weren't there to witness that. But it probably hasn't frozen since then. But yeah, no, New York is not just cool, it's truly cold, which is why until Constantine Frank, a Ukrainian immigrant who spoke 9 languages, moved to Upper New York State, did he and a group of others get the courage to really plant vinifera varieties, because he knew that grapes like R. Cazzotelli, which is that's I'm going for R. Cazzotelli.
There you go.
He knew that grapes like those grew in Ukraine, where it is also freezing cold. Christy, I want your take on this Riesling. What's your thought about it?
I mean, I love this wine, and it's kind of fun in the sense that it's sort of the polar opposite in terms of sweetness versus dryness. Riesling, I love to show off this specific wine, because so many people, when you suggest Riesling, they think, oh, it's just going to be sweet. All Rieslings are sweet. Not this audience, but plenty of people that walk into my shop. And this is one of the wines from the Finger Lakes that I specifically like to put in front of people, because it's dry. It is bone dry. It is racy, but yet it still has lovely acidity to it, so it won't make them cry. There are certain Rieslings that I can put in front of people. It'll be like, this will bring tears to your eyes. This brings tears to your eyes because it's so delicious, not because it's so painfully dry. So I think it's a great example of what a dry Riesling can be when it is grown in the right place with just this beautiful level of ripeness, and how that sort of balances.
Yeah, and bone dry wines like this, I suppose the other thing related that I love about them is that you really can, they're so sheer. It's like a plate of glass in a way. You really see, they can't hide behind anything, because there's no oak, there's nothing to hide behind. So great wine is great, and not great wine is not great, and you'll know right off the bat. But that kind of crystalline sense of purity allows you to sense the wine's minerality. It's like little fireflies going off in the wine or something. I mean, little sparks of minerals. It's a very kinetic, I guess, on the palate, and not expensive, which is the other complete high, right?
That's really, it's incredible.
Yeah.
These wines over deliver. They're just so impressive for the price points.
Yeah. For those of you who are wondering about the acidity on this wine, it is 8.3 grams per liter. Let me put that in context. Champagne, bone dry champagne, has about 5 or 6 grams per liter. And champagne strikes all of us as being, pretty crisp. So for this to be 8.3, it's like a soprano. It's like hovering, idling, vibrating at this incredibly high level because of that delicious acidity. Yeah.
But a really good, talented soprano, not a screechy soprano.
Not a screechy soprano.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. All right. We've got to go over to the red NEWT cellars, and let me hold this bottle up. Here we have it. This is the 2019 Cabernet Franc. I'm sure we must have some Cabernet Franc lovers watching, at least probably the three of us are. Yannick, you go on this wine.
Yeah, so this winery was founded in the late 90s by David and Deborah Whiting, who also have a really great restaurant there as well. And just like a lot of the producers out in the Finger Lakes, you know, they focus on a lot of different grapes. But I think that Red NEWT, where they really shine, me personally, is with their Riesling, which we actually pour by the glass, the 2017 vintage at the restaurant. And then their Cabernet Franc, and they make different styles too. I particularly am a big fan of this Cabernet Franc. And I should mention before I go any further, the winemaker here, you know, Kelby Russell, incredibly talented, doing a really great job. What I like about Cab Franc, when you find it in the Loire Valley, sort of the birthplace, that's what we identify Cab Franc, northern France. You know, again, these green kind of aromas, these parasinic notes, these notes of these vegetal aromas, and these beautiful, you know, tart red fruits, cranberry, rhubarb, sour cherry. And I think you're getting that with this wine. Now, Red NEWT, it's on the east side of Seneca Lake, right? So they do get a considerable amount of sun, right? Because the sun sets on the west, so you're getting more sunshine on the. And I don't, if you ever have the opportunity to go out to the Finger Lakes, there's actually this whole like East Coast, West Coast kind of thing on the Seneca Lake, which is quite funny. It's a friendly rivalry, but certainly they have their own micro terroir, and it's quite diverse. And again, just like you mentioned it, there are pockets where it's more impacted by shale and schist and all that, but also where the sun sets and where the sun rises. So that's really the key. But I think this is a wine for me personally that I give a chill, and just enjoy it, and brings out the brightness of the fruit, brings out the acidity. You know, I think it's about 25 to 30% whole cluster. I love wines that have full cluster. Really, again, I use the word energy, but floral. And this is a wine, again, versatility here. You know, it's not overly tannic. It's an unadulterated wine. This is what you're getting right now. What they picked and how it got fermented, that's it. Nothing's been added to it. It's a real pure wine in itself.
Let me define a couple of ideas. Pyrazinic. Oof, oof, oof. God, man, Yannick, you need a personal translator here. Okay, I'm jumping in. Pyrazines, compounds in Cabernets and also in Sauvignon Blanc that at their extreme can cause a green bell pepper character, but are very natural to these varieties. And at a lower level, have this interesting rosemary, sage, just a really pretty green kind of character in the wine. And they're very welcome in well-made Cabernet Franc. Whole cluster, meaning taking the whole cluster, including the little stems between the grapes, which is called the rachis, throwing the whole thing in the tank. And those stems, not surprisingly, have a flavor, right? Remember, as a kid, you just, I don't know, took a stem or a little baby branch off a bush and chewed on it. Those stems have a slightly spicy, slightly green character. And so wineries that do whole cluster are looking for that extra sort of positive stem contribution to flavor. I think we lost Yannick there. Hopefully he'll jump back on. But Christy, he mentioned, I wasn't sure if Yannick said, I get the chills, or he thinks this is good for chilling. But you tell me, I think this wine would be good, slightly chilled.
Yeah, I definitely have a little bit of a chill on it because all those things that we talked about, like a little bit of a whole cluster, and it's a lighter style. And I'm not sure if it sees any oak, but it's not dripping with new oak. So this is a style that I just love a little chill because it brings out that sort of purity of fruit and kind of makes it pop. And I think that's something that has been great to see. I want to say over the last 10 years, which probably means it's been over the last 20 years, this move away from trying to there are certain sites clearly throughout New York and throughout the Finger Lakes where you can get ripeness that can handle a fair amount of new oak and all of that additional sort of smokiness and clove and all of those flavors that it adds to it. But I've been so excited to see the region just be more confident with, let's work with the sites that we have and make wines like this that are about fruit expression, about juiciness, about purity, that aren't trying to sort of fancify them up in a way that sometimes they can't always handle. Like, this is a delicious wine and I love it, and I love it with a chill. And it gives me chills.
And again, yeah, thank you. Yeah, me too. And it's such a good point, because not only does it allow the purity to show more, but it keeps the wine reasonably priced. I mean, once you start aging a wine in $1,200 per barrels, you go from $20 to $40 like in a nanosecond. Yep. So that is an important addition. And Catherine's pointing out another factor that I think is wonderful for her to point out, which is when you don't cover a wine up with oak, when it has this kind of purity, you see its spiciness. She calls it black pepperiness in the wine too. In fact, if you're tasting along with us and you taste this wine again and think black pepper and salt, you'll be like, oh man, there they are, right? Of course, there's no black pepper in the wine and there's no actual salt in the wine, but those kinds of enlivening spices are really important. So, Christy, let me ask you, what because you've worked in retail, and because you do work in retail, do you find that people will they take your recommendations on things, or will people say, yeah, but no, just give me something from California?
We get a lot of, some people will take my recommendations. And increasingly they'll come in and they will ask for something local. And where we are, I consider everything in New York local, but I especially consider the Finger Lakes local. So people do come in and they are asking for, they want to explore and they want to try things. As a retailer, where I want to be really careful is I want to make sure they get the bottle that they will enjoy. So if they come in and they're giving me cues that what they really want is a California Cabernet, something from a really warm, going on hot, verging on fire sort of place, I don't necessarily have something from the Finger Lakes at my store that I can give them. So I will want to try to put something in their hands, but I want to make sure they know what they're expecting, so that they walk away thinking, this is like this Cabernet Franc. If I give this to somebody who wants a Napa Valley Cabernet, they're not necessarily going to be happy with it. But it's a delicious wine. So I don't want to give that to somebody and then they'll be like, oh, I don't like this region. No, this wine just isn't your style. So there's a lot of people looking for recommendations. It's just matching what they say they want with what they really want.
Yeah. And good psychology there, right? I mean, anyone who's worked in restaurants or retail knows that the psychological deciphering that you have to do is amazing. I wonder if both of you would agree with me that, first of all, I want to say California Cab Franc is not like New York Cab Franc at all. It's a whole different animal. This is very much more like Loire Valley, all those beautiful florals and spice and, aliveness and freshness. And it's yin to California Cab Franc's yang for sure. But I wonder if both of you would agree that New York Cab Franc has a little bit of something that is maybe evocative of Pinot Noir. Not that it tastes like Pinot Noir, but that it's about subtlety and nuance, and you're drawn into it. It's not going to slam you with tannin. It's not going to slam you with alcohol, right? It's more nuance and complexity.
I would agree. And I think a lot of that has to do with it being from, like we were talking about, being a cooler climate. You have a longer growing season. You just have weather that allows for wines that are elegant, where you can sort of get that transparency and purity, and you can taste the grape and the site and the climate all kind of coming together. So, which is what Pinot Noir, people love Pinot Noir for that reason as well, is that it transmits, it's a grape that transmits the place exquisitely. And I think Cabernet Franc in New York does a lot of the same things.
Yeah. Yannick, you want to jump in on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I would certainly put that in the same category as well as Gamay. I mean, Gamay is having its moment too, in that whole kind of, Hudson Valley, Finger Lakes region. I have a Gamay from White Cliff Vineyards. They're right in the heart of the Hudson Valley. Great, wonderful family, doing some really nice stuff. I mean, and it offers all that beauty that we all like about Gamay, that accessibility, that softness. But yet, I always say, like Gamay and even Cab Franc, there's always a little edge to it. There's a little bite to it. It's not tannic, but there is that little rusticity to it. And I think that's what we really love. It's got this loveliness, but it lets you know I'm still here. I'm kind of waking you up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautifully said. So I want to ask you both, this is kind of like the super fun question. If you were given a huge budget, which of course you never will be, but okay, me either. And your goal was to get people to all over the country to drink more New York State wine. What are like a couple of things you do? Ooh. I know, it's a big one. I mean, it's a big, hard question.
So you're saying like to give a tour of like the state of New York, or just a tasting of wines from the state of New York?
Yeah, no, let's say you were given $1 million. Okay. And someone said, we need New York State wine to be better known across the country.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with that $1 million?
Well, I'll just answer this very quickly. I think it's really important to really showcase everything that the state of New York does, right? And just like Christy had just pointed out earlier, it's not just vinifera, but it's hybrids, right? It's Lambrusco grapes as well. And then they're making some, you take guys like Floral Terrains. I don't know if you know those guys, but they're out in the north. Well, they're not in the North Fork actually, but they're in Roslyn, New York, just before you go to the North Fork. And he's making wine right out of his garage, right? And he's got all these great contracts and with these local farmers on the North Fork. And then he's actually foraging apples. It's unbelievable. So I think, and then you go up to the Hudson Valley and you meet Todd Cavallo, who does Wild Ark, and he's doing a really great job with hybrids as well. And really, and this is minimal intervention. Karima Sood, German and Lebanese immigrants who came to the North Fork back in the 70s when the North Fork was only potato farms. And now they've taken it to another level. And I think they make some of the best Chenin Blanc in the United States too, and for an incredible price too, as well. Very reasonable. I have it on the list as well. So again, I think that the key is to really showcase, and also showcase the history, right? Brotherhood Winery has got an incredible past. It's an incredible winery to visit too, Ben Morrow. Again, Constantine Frank. So I'd want to encompass all of that, but really just showcase the geological diversity, all the different grapes, the different philosophies that are being implemented. And I think that's what I would do. And just really, if I could get a bunch of people to drive around the state of New York and see how beautiful it is, besides just Manhattan Island, I think they'd be pretty impressed.
Well said. Christy?
Yeah, well, this is a tricky one. So Yannick's going to bring them all here, which I think is important, but Yannick is doing that. I would, it's a technical answer. I would take the money and I would lobby to change the interstate shipping law so that we could easily send wine to everybody.
Good one.
We could get the wine in front of people who want to order it. So everybody on this call who's like, ooh, I want to try some of this New York wine.
Awesome.
Do something so that I'll provide free shipping for everybody. Free shipping somehow so that we can get the wine to you, and then credits to get it to distributors. to actually get it into the markets beyond just New York, because these wines are wines that can stand up against wines from anywhere else in the country. They can stand up against wines anywhere else in the world. And I think that's something that New York has done really well, is focusing on, we're not just bringing people to our backyard. It's beautiful and they'll fall in love when they do it, but these wines can go out into the rest of the world and compete, which I think is something that not every other region in this country can do, and New York is already there. So just anything that I can do to get these wines so that people can easily order them when they want them.
Yeah, you know, Janet writing in echoes that a bit, saying tours, tastings, all of that is very good. But another recommendation, get more professional writing about the wines of New York State. Yeah. I've traveled to the Finger Lakes region and was desperately trying to figure out which of the 100 wineries to visit. It was not easy to do, she says. And I think it is true that we writers have a role to play, and perhaps even a responsibility there too. Well, you two, I want to thank you. I'm glad we're tasting these fantastic wines. It's been fun to taste with you. I'm glad everyone has joined us. And I'm coming to you from Napa Valley, but next time, my friends, in New York.
Cheers.
Cheers to both of you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Karen. Pleasure.
And thanks everyone for joining us. We're very grateful for your attention, and to more New York wine in your life.
Indeed.